For those of you watching in, my name is Martin Woodford. I'm chairman of the board. A reminder that this is a meeting in public, not a public meeting, so it is accessible to people both on Zoom and on Facebook. Although it's not a public meeting, though, we do take questions during the course of the meeting from the public that have been raised in advance. This time we're taking those fairly early on the agenda, which is good. If questions are raised in the background during the course of the meeting, we'll most likely endeavour to answer those offline after the event. As you've already heard, this meeting is being recorded as is usual for minute-taking purposes. We are Welsh language capable in terms of Welsh language speakers around the table, just in case that issue arises. Sadly, Trish, I believe on this occasion we don't have the British Sign Language Service, which is unfortunate, but beyond our control. But obviously we'll reinstate that for the next meeting. This is an unusual venture for us, coming back face to face, but running hybrid with technology as well. So we'll obviously learn from the experience, but I hope those looking in find that you can hear us and see us as well. Bit of protocol here. I think some of you are on camera because you're to the side of the room. Remember to keep your microphone off. For me, chairing, it's easier if you raise your hand to indicate you want to speak. But I think you'll also switch camera on if you're on live to come on the screen as well, just as a fail-safe. What we don't want are people talking simultaneously, which will be very difficult for listeners looking in. It's quite a lengthy agenda, as you'll well know, but we do have a comfort break scheduled. If my time is correct, that comes after the committee reports. We have a number of this time, which should be around 11:45 if we run to time. So we'll keep an eye on that. Okay, so that's me by way of preliminaries. So let's get on with the formal proceedings. First of all, to record apologies. I've got, let's see who had any late. 4 apologies: Kevin Davis, Vice Chair, Kerry Jackson, Martin Turner, and Jova Singh, non-executive directors. Jova was actually scheduled to attend, but sadly is unwell today, so that's the reason for his non-appearance. I think that's it, Steve, isn't it, for apologies. There are a couple of welcomes or introductions. Hannah Rowan, welcome to your first face-to-face board, in fact, your first board meeting as a non-executive director. We're delighted that you're joining us. Look forward to your contributions during the meeting. Dr. Catherine Goodman, you've been to board meetings before, of course, but I think this is your first as interim Director of Workforce and OD, so in that capacity, welcome. Is there anybody I've missed? Wendy, I think we missed introducing you last time as interim Director of Nursing, but you're a veteran of one meeting now, so we'll continue, shall we? Okay, let's just check before we go any further that we're quorate. I think with 4 non-executives, including myself, we are, and obviously we have a full complement of executives. Okay. On to declarations of interest. We have here 2 standing declarations from people who are actually not in attendance, I think. So we don't for this meeting need to note those. But are there any other declarations we need to cover? No? Okay, fine. Straight on then to the minutes of the last meeting, which seems an age ago, 24th of March. A very comprehensive set of minutes. I won't go through them page by page, but are there any points of accuracy that people want to raise? Okay, are we happy to receive those? Yes. Thank you. And then we have matters arising that are not on the agenda and action log as well. Are there any items that have risen for the minutes that are not covered on the agenda, today? It's pretty broad, so you can read pretty much any subject in if you wish, but just to double check. Okay, and then the action log. We've got one item which I think the recording is closed, Trish. That's the Audit Wales work on unscheduled care, which you're clear on that's starting, isn't it?
It is. Sure, that's complete.
As far as the action log is concerned, that's complete. Okay. Well, we'll hasten on then to the chair's report. Sadly, it's me speaking a lot at the beginning and then not speaking, which is the feature of the meetings. Introductory remarks. I wanted to be quite brief because I know we've got a lot to cover. I was looking back through my calendar to see the sort of meetings that I've been covering in the last 2 months, and they're too innumerable to go through. And I think everybody would be bored, but I wanted to pick out 3 really, which for me signified in terms of what we're about today. Firstly, the first long service awards event for our staff in North Wales in Conwy last week, which was I think a brilliant occasion to acknowledge the contribution of staff through their long service and our volunteers. I thought that was a very heartening, quite an emotional event actually, and it was great to have the Lord Lieutenant and High Sheriff there. But the reason I particularly draw that out is to see all those people in the room with their pleasure and commitment working for the ambulance service is a reminder that our staff are a big group that we serve as a board, and I think that will feature further on into our discussions today about the issues that we face as a service. So that was the one meeting. The second meeting was also last week, where I went to the unveiling of an ambulance in Aberystwyth at the station there. Highly unusually, the funds donated from the will of the late Morvid Jones, who was born in Aberystwyth or nearby, and we're going to Canada subsequently. Sadly deceased a few years ago, but left part of her legacy to us to purchase an ambulance. And there were 15 members of her family, many of whom were from the local area and who knew the staff. And it was a great occasion. One of her surviving brother actually sat in the ambulance and was at the steering wheel and handed the keys to one of our crews. And that was a very touching and poignant occasion. It demonstrated the other feature of this, which is we must not forget the people and local people. People have a connection to the service. People are connected to our staff. And it's those people that we serve, such that somebody who migrated to Canada in 1962 wants to mark what we do and donated something to us many decades later. I think it tells you the story about that connection. But I think that's unique. So the local people that we serve is the second strand. And that comes out from the third meeting I wanted to highlight, where you and I, Jason, went to the Board of Community Health Councils for us, I think it was, to talk about the world and where we're at. Representatives of each Community Health Council from Wales. They, of course, are the current patient body, the voice of the patient. And what was striking about that was, and these people are remunerated to some degree, but they're essentially volunteers representing the public. And what struck me about that was their honest endeavour to make a difference on behalf of those people that they represent. But what came out from that was politeness, interest, but also concern. So on behalf of the public, I've referenced in the context of that, the ambulance unveiling, on behalf of the very same public, their expression of concern about the pressure that we're experiencing and the impact on our service. So I think for today, with the agenda that we've got, to cut to the chase, a lot of today's agenda is looking back as to how we're doing as a board in governance terms, are we fit for purpose, looking back at our results for the past year, up to the end of March, which isn't far back, but it's going to get us into the current situation necessarily. I just think we need to hang on to that spirit of service to both our staff and our public, those local people, when we weave through these discussions and future discussions. So I think that's really what it's fundamentally about. So I hope that was a helpful scene set. I won't take questions. I think we'll move on to Jason and your report next, if you're happy to.
Thanks, Chairman. So as ever, I'll pull out 5 or 6 areas of the report, and then clearly happy to take any questions on it. This paper covers activity and matters of interest to the board since we last met a couple of months ago. Firstly, can I take everyone's attention to paragraph 20, please? This is about the roster review, the EMS roster review. It's on page 5, paragraph 20. I just want to say here, and perhaps draw out a bit more than is in the paper, is that we're approaching the conclusion of the four-stage process, which has been underway at each station, including local operational staff, local trade union colleagues, and the local management team, supported by Working Time Solutions, to create the rosters that staff locally at each station will work, recognising that the modelling, which the simulation modelling, which originally led to the roster review decision as part of the demand capacity review in 2019, was based on a data sample at the end of 2008, and much has changed since then. The board will want to be assured that it is still the right thing to do to press ahead with the roster change. And of course, some colleagues will remember that we refreshed the modelling at the back end of the last calendar year with commissioners, and that led to some adjustments to the roster keys which underpin the rosters which have been developed through the four-stage process locally. And as recently as in the last 2 weeks, we've done a due diligence assessment with a separate independent simulation modelling organisation to say to ourselves, is it still the right thing to do to press ahead and implement these rosters, even with all the disruption and change that's happened since 2018 and the original data sample, which led to the roster review coming forward? And the answer is yes. That due diligence assessment says to us that despite all of that, it is the right thing to do, and we do see largely flat, so no material change in red performance as a result of the roster change, as it's currently configured, but we do see a noticeable reduction in tail on amber performance as a result of implementation costs. And of course, the choices that we made with commissioners were about balancing off equity of access for all patients across Wales. And so we do believe, based on the latest due diligence assessment, as I say, literally in the last fortnight, that pressing ahead with implementation of rosters from September in a phased way through to November is the right thing to do. If I can then move us on to paragraph 30. So this is the implementation of the new emergency communication nurse system, also used for the first time globally by paramedics here in Wales, which has been implemented in the clinical support desk in our 909 contact centre in the last couple of weeks. So you can see from the paragraph there that go live on the 17th of May. And we've already congratulated and thanked the team in CCCs for their work to bring this live in quick order. But I think the board will want to note that this new software tool, this decision support software tool, is gone live, and we're working working with the supplier about in ways to, I guess, benefit or maximise the benefit from the new tool that we've got. There's over 600 jobs already, calls already gone through it, as I understand, and we've already, within the first day or so, seen our first highly compliant call come through in terms of the audit process. So it's good news, good news, and the board can take some comfort from so this new decision support tool available for consultant close, or what we used to call the retreat in the clinical contact. We can then go forward to page 7 and paragraph 34. I just want to draw the board's attention here to the list of capital and estates projects that are underway, and indeed the facility we're in today for this face-to-face board meeting has just been concluded. So since we last met, the Cardiff area ambulance station with the new Make-Ready depot has gone live and opened, replacing Blackware, and this facility here also now houses the Grange discharge and transfer service staff who are in temporary accommodation just down the road at that Grange site. Now, of course, there's much we know as a board. There is much more to do across our operational estate with much improvement necessary. But it is pleasing to see many of these projects now coming to a conclusion with fit for purpose modern facilities available for our staff, but we do recognise that many more, much more to do. Then if I could just take us to paragraph 64, please. This is about the with us, not against us campaign. Sadly, despite the campaign and all the efforts we've put in over the last couple of years, we do continue to see a rise in violence and aggression against our staff, both frontline operational staff and also those working in contact centres. We will be doing a further piece of public promotion around this campaign, which will be extended with emergency service partners across Wales for another 12 months, given the impact it does have, violence and aggression does have on our people. So we're doing all that we can to prevent violence and aggression towards our staff. And of course, when it sadly does occur, we will, where we can, seek prosecution and firm judicial disposal for anyone who assaults our people. And we'll see some custody, well, a number of custodial sentences for assaults against our people in recent months. And we always pursue those with the CPS and the relevant police force. So there'll be a few bits more on this campaign, which is quite hard hitting over the bank holiday weekend or ahead of the bank holiday weekend. And some board members will have probably seen that we've now got decals on the back and wheel of some of our vehicles, so a mobile billboard, if you like, on our fleet, reminding the public and the community that we are here to serve them, as you've just said, Chairman, and our people can't help them if they're fighting for their own safety. So much more on that going to come. And just two final things, if I can. Paragraph 65, please, on page 12. So this is what we termed as 111 week, which was to celebrate not only the fantastic work that all our people across the 111 service and the numerous contact centres we have across Wales, fantastic work they do, but also recognise that we are now providing nationally the front-end service for 111 after Cardiff Vale went live in the last couple of months. And then finally, paragraph 69, on the 12th of May, we marked International Nurses Day, again, to celebrate and recognise the fantastic contribution that about 200 nurses across the organisation offer to the services that we provide, not just in 111, but also increasingly in the 999 service too. So I'll pause there, Chairman, and happy to take any questions.
Okay, thank you. Just to say, I'm not, people probably aren't on Zoom, so if you're using the chat function on Zoom, it doesn't pop up on my screen. So, Stella, I think you referenced public questions in the chat. We'll pick up on that afterwards. Okay, back to this report, very comprehensive. Are there any questions or reflections? Paul?
Just the one if I can, referring to para 19 on page 5 on the heart. Great to see his 10-year anniversary. I just wonder how we can publicise that. It's a small area of the organisation. We don't talk about that often. So I just wonder with the 10-year anniversary, what preparation we can make to publicise it a little better. That's to you or to Estelle.
I'll pick that up with the team for the honest answer is I don't know. But I'm sure the team will WhatsApp me and figures of family. It's just that I'm not that close to it, but I will find out for them.
That's good. Thanks, Jim. Is that something you know about the board acknowledging that anniversary?
Yes.
Yes. Any other looking at screen and okay.
Thank you, Chair. I don't have any questions. I just wanted to make some comments, really. And it's all related to one theme. We all are very aware of the pressure that have been for very many months. And I just wanted to acknowledge within your approaches, and you've got so many positive initiatives, so many successes, things that we can and should celebrate. And I just wanted to have that formally on the record, just as examples, and I'm going to leave ones out, but really pleased with paragraph 89, we'll be talking about Welsh language initiative and how we continue to work in terms of embedding stronger approaches with that. Similarly, paragraph 45, with regards to the work undertaken by the palliative care paramedics, and that came to light in the recent Quest committee meeting, and there was some wonderful. And I'm looking at Wendy, we were at the meeting, and I drew particular attention to this. One of the comments we had as feedback for the support received for the palliative care paramedics and the work they do down in South West Wales. And then finally, the pause and predicting model. You know, it's great to see that that's going from strength to strength because it's so needed, so badly needed, and will help us manage the broader pressure. So thank you to everyone for all the work you do really, because we mustn't forget the successes amidst the ongoing challenges.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think those are very worthy comments. We must remember to keep our voices up, I'm told. So, okay. Anna, your opening contribution.
Thanks
No
for that. No, actually, just picking up one of Bethan's points. I was also interested in the point 45. We had some fantastic colleagues come to speak to us recently about their experience as part of the palliative care through specialism. And I wondered what the plans were to extend that. The statistics were extremely positive. I appreciate it's a very small sample at the moment, but I was really struck by the information you shared, Jason, around 81% of patients being able to remain in their early care setting, and only 2 going through the emergency department doors. So yeah, just wondered how we're going to broaden that out.
Yeah, so I'll probably bring Andy on this. I mean, many of us in here, and for those listening, would have probably had personal examples of this, this kind of experience, and dignity at the end of life, and support to the patients and the families is so important. This is a embryonic but fantastic opportunity for us to be able to support people. And I agree, it's something that with the support conditions we would want to do much more of. It's taking someone at the end of their life, with terminal illness to a new day, is almost always not the right answer. Almost always not the right answer. So, Andy, do you want to come in on, how this has come about and what we're doing perhaps to extend it?
Yeah, so I mean, first and foremost, this starts really with an all brand and the support we've had from the world to create his role as an independent organisation, which is, indeed a rare thing across Europe and UK. So, Ed's role in this has been absolutely central in developing that and with us around in terms of that team. So, testament to him to get this up and off the ground. But it really is an example of the partnership working with the health board, because it was helpful that initial approach and so we have this multidisciplinary team. If it is again, and I think that would be well filled in the pandemic. We look for working with us together. We've been encouraging that with all our health boards, if they identify where the fields are paramedical fit, it matters to recruit to work with us and we can develop rotation models. And this is an example of it. As you said, the impact is it shocked me as to the impact that these four paramedics have had and how successful it's been, far greater than anticipated. Ultimately, we don't know how many other health boards are interested in this. Because obviously we don't want to set up as all palliative care service. It would be in conjunction with health boards. We've got a number that are expressing interest for us to see the results of the pilot strategy.
Bring on that point, I guess.
Yeah, it's just to reinforce what Andy was saying. So this is something that we operate in partnership and for the palliative care network across Wales. So it's been worked with some of the key consultants that have enabled us to get to this position. Particularly, I'd say it was Baker, who's one of the national leads in the Swansea area, but we've also had great support in the Cardiff area from Nikki Keynes, who's been instrumental in setting this sort of that. So it's not work that we are pushing on an individual organisation level. This is very much a partnership with the palliative care network. So we're keeping those relations close through Emma Bryan, closely, and any opportunities then to expand the services we would like to support.
Thank you, Brandon. Rachel.
Yeah, I was just going to say that actually, as part of the commissioning arrangements, we recently had an indication from our chief adults Services Commissioner, that we'd like every health board and us to develop a local plan, things that we could do that are priorities locally for us and them. Now we always used to do that, and kind of through the pandemic, it went a bit by the wayside. But I'm hoping that this mental health, other kind of specialist areas might perform, might become part of those local pathways, and we can also take the evidence from Swansea into discussions with other health boards and hopefully a bit more interest that over. But I think it's going to be quite positive.
So is the Commissioner sort of pushing this forward in that respect?
He's not particularly pushing the palliative care one, but he's pushing the idea that there ought to be considerations at local level at each health board of pathways that will avoid people needing to go into hospital. So we've just started that process now, I think, of getting the meetings up and running, in the health boards. I think it's a good opportunity for us to showcase, what we've done in one patch of Wales and hopefully then be able to bring that to life.
Craig, you want to come in?
On a separate point, please, just want to say thank you to Jason and the team for this robust pursuit of the violence and aggression towards the staff. Not just our frontline ambulance crew, but also our CCC, which is, we know that it is challenging for all our staff. And one of the focuses during today's meeting, I'm sure, will be on staff sickness. And what we know is that we can't serve our patients if our staff aren't there, and if that is a direct result of violence and aggression. So I thank Jason and the exec team for looking after our staff in such a robust way and to take up that service.
Appreciate it, thank you. Any other comments or reflections? Okay, very comprehensive and useful report and some good insights there from the floor, which are very helpful. I think we were asked simply to receive the report, to note it. I'm not allowed to say no, we do more than that. We've received the report and had a discussion, but we're pleased to do that.
Yeah.
Okay. Now I'm told, correct me if I'm wrong, that we're getting sound difficulties. Can I suggest that, given that I think we've only had one question itself from the public in advance meeting at this point, we'll probably gain some time. So can I suggest that we adjourn for 5 minutes to see whether we can improve the sound quality? Nobody leave the room, because you all leave, we'll never get everybody back in. So just sit tight for 5 whilst we address this issue, hopefully. Okay. So I think we now move on to the monthly integrated performance report, which Rachel, I think you're going to introduce. Just by way of context for this, for people hopefully hearing what we're saying, which is that obviously we're aware of the current pressures upon the service. That's very much the theme of this meeting. But in terms of our response to that, on the issue of escalation of further up the line, in terms of our concerns, we're having a discussion in private board after this public meeting in order to determine what steps next to take. As you can imagine, it's not easy to have that kind of discussion in free form in a public meeting. So I'm being transparent here and introducing this remark to say we will be formulating further actions later on today in our closed board. The consequence of those outcomes will be reported at a later stage in the next convenient public board. So in that context, Rachel, I know it's a difficult performance report to present, but I'll pass over to you.
Thanks very much, Chair. I'm conscious, Hannah, as a new member of the board, so just to start my video. Okay. Apologies. Yes, so what this board paper tries to do when it's there every month is to set out our performance against a few key metrics, and we decide those metrics every year. We're going to be reviewing them, and they're grouped into 4 aspects. So a number of metrics that kind of give us at a high level an idea of the quality, safety, and patient experience. Some metrics which tell us about our staff well-being, some around our financial performance and the value that the service brings, and then a number of metrics which really look at how we work in partnership with other organisations and bring value to the wider system. So, as I just mentioned, that's a group of metrics that we would look to amend and review every year. So, in line with the new IMTP that we have agreed, my team are currently undertaking that review, and will be then talking to each of the chairs of the subcommittees, and then bringing that back at the next set of committees for agreement in terms of, do we want to make any amends, do we want to make any additions, do we want to take anything out, and we know as part of the quality performance management framework that we've recently agreed that not only do we want to do that exercise at a broad level, we want to work our way down the organisation, clear about the metrics that we're going to be reviewing and looking at throughout the organisation, right down to frontline services. So that's something that will be coming back in due course, which hopefully I think will be helpful. I do think there will be some amends, particularly as we're looking at our ambition around APPs, for example, and doing things differently and reversing the triangle. I think there'll be some changing, I think, in some of the metrics that will help us to understand our progress there. The other thing, just to note, we had got some data from other ambulance services around the UK in terms of some of their metrics. So my team again are working on that. I think having looked at it and reviewed it, I mean, it is clear that ambulance services across the UK measure things slightly differently. There are different categories, different definitions. So the ability to present that in a way that's helpful to people, I think is just taking us a little bit longer. I think I've said to my team, definitely need to kind of work with yourself from an ops perspective to understand some of those differences a bit better before we present them. But I know when I've looked at some board governance papers, that are out there before, I think it's important that the board does get a sense occasionally of that, benchmarking against other parts of similar organisations. So hopefully we bring some impact on that again next time. So moving on then to the metrics themselves. So again, as you know, and for those of you who are familiar, within Annex 1 is the performance against each of those 28 metrics, and it has some detailed description there about what the metrics are telling us, what the actions are that we're undertaking as an organisation in terms of improving those metrics, and a little bit where it's possible about what we are foreseeing in terms of the forecast for those metrics over the coming months. So the S bar that sits on top of that then just tries to pull out some of the key facts relating to those metrics, and the first bit of the S bar then talks about those metrics which are relating to the quality, safety and patient experience. So just pulling out a few things there. The first, as you just mentioned, Catherine, the first part that first time that patients see us is when they call. And in particular, the 999 calls, it's really important that we answer that call very quickly. And you'll note that we have had some deterioration over the previous months in terms of the time that we answer 999 calls. So the median time still remains good, but we know we've got a tail of people who experience potentially no answer for over a minute. And you'll see in the S-car there that obviously as a board, and you'll recall that we put some of our own resources into expanding our call handlers last year, which was positive, but we haven't been able to continue that investment into this financial year, not secured any resources from commissioners. So we are undertaking some work, and my team indicated, I think that's just about finished now in terms of Optima helping us to do some modelling so that we've got some better evidence as opposed to go back to consider with commissioners in terms of the capacity that we need within the centres to be able to answer within the right time. For 111, you'll see that although there's a slight deterioration here, I think actually we're still seeing a lot better performance than we've done over previous months. So this is, when you measure that, is the percentage of people who are answering within 60 seconds and the percentage of people who abandon the calls. So those numbers are, it is better, but it's still some way to go. We were very successful actually at appointing a large number of call handlers over the winter period last year. But as demand is settling now, coming out of the pandemic and demand appears to be settling, notwithstanding the fact we saw an increase in April, that's because we took on Cardiff, so we knew we were going to have an increase in demand in April. So we are having conversations with the commissioner now about what's the right number of call handlers going forward available to fund. And there will be a requirement from their perspective to fund the right number. There will be a requirement from our perspective to make sure that we're using that capacity and that resource as efficiently as we can, and there are actions in place within the team to improve the way in which we utilise that resource. So in terms of moving on through the SBAR and moving on to some of the other quality metrics, and I'm moving on here to the section on ambulance response. So clearly this is one of the biggest areas of worry, as you just mentioned, Chair. So this relates to our ability to get to red and amber calls in a timely manner. And the board will know from previous months' reports that we have not been achieving 65% target in terms of red performance. And our amber one response times deteriorated again this month in April, and in fact the 95th centile, which so that's the 5% of our amber one patients waited longer than 7 hours 18 minutes to be seen. So we know, and you can see also in this report, one of the metrics we look at is the number of very serious incidents which we report directly to Welsh Government, where they're related to things that we have done, and also a series of incidents that we pass across the health boards called Appendix B. So again, for those who are not familiar, that's a joint investigation framework that we use to work with health boards where it's believed that hospital handling delays are the primary cause of that serious incident for that patient. So you see that the numbers that have been passed across there are relatively high as well. So we know that patients are getting a poor service there, and that those long response times have got a direct impact on outcomes for patients. So clearly, when this report tries to just pull out for you some of the actions which we internally are able to take in relation to, and we have been taking. The first is around our capacity. What capacity have we got resources for, and are we recruiting up to that level? And I think it's fair to say we recruit up to the level that we're resourced, and we've done well in the last 2 years in terms of growth, and there are ongoing discussions. I think the Commission is going about what is the right level of resource that is needed to meet the demand that we see, and that's an ongoing discussion because we've not had any to date additional resource this year to update our frontline resource staffing further. We do have a tiny bit of capacity that the commissioners have given us, which is kind of pretty much going to be lasting us the first 4 months of the year. So they're giving us some capacity for cohorting at Morriston and at the Grange University Hospital, and we had some capacity from St John in April, which was funded by commissioners, but that is, we know, a non-current resource, and as I say, there's still a discussion there about that resource that envelope the commissions are able to provide, or Welsh Government able to provide into the rest of the year. Clearly, from our perspective, there's a range of things that we can do in order to make best use of the resources that we have. So, Jason, you already mentioned the roster review, and the reason that's important from a performance perspective is that it shifts resources from to the time of the day and the day that the demand is occurring. So it better aligns our capacity with the demand. And as a result, by making that change in roster, it's the equivalent of employing another 72 people. So we don't have to employ them 72 people because we've made the change to improve that balance of demand and capacity. So that's a really positive thing But we do know that it's a difficult programme of work to work through, and we've been very grateful, I think, with our training partners for the support and coming alongside and helping to really take that forward in partnership. It's been good. We know from our own perspective as well, and later on in the S5, we've got the data as well, we do have high levels of sickness absence, and that has been an issue for us for a while, and the pandemic has exacerbated that, no doubt. It's not in the paper, but just for the board to be aware, we did a very brief look round, board reports from other ambulance services across the UK in the last week, actually just to kind of get a sense of, the picture with other providers like us, and we're kind of in the middle of a patch. So there are a couple of ambulance services that have got better sickness absence levels than us, but there are actually 3 or 4 who are the same or worse than us. So I think that's not to say at all that we don't think there's action that we can take, but I think just for the board to understand the context for us and for all ambulance services, that there's an equal pressure in all areas of the UK, which we know we've seen through media, etc. So we do have a managing attendance programme that's being reported into execs every 2 weeks, and that's a 7 kind of prong approach in terms of 7 types of work that are being undertaken. And the aim is that will now reduce sickness absence in line with the trajectory that we're seeing in the IMC picture that we predicted a level of reduction there we can measure ourselves against. In terms of other things that we can do as an organisation, which we are doing, we're seeing that there are other ways of managing our demand other than sending an ambulance. So we know we've got agreement, and we agree with commissions that we would prioritise additional clinicians into the CSD. Those staff are in place, and along with the ECNS system that Jason alluded to earlier, that is going to transform that department. And we are starting to see increases in that consultant close rate, not every day, but there are days when we're seeing that going up to 14-15%. We know we hit the target we had for ourselves last year, which was 10.2%, and we sent to our commissioners and to Welsh Government actually earlier this week that we're hoping that by the second part of this year we'll be moving more consistently towards that 15%. So that's a real positive. But clearly, the one factor on page 4 that we know affects our response times considerably is the capacity that we lose with crews waiting to hand over outside emergency departments. And there were over 3,000 hours lost in April, which was about 30% of our total conveying resource in that month. And I think, we put a sentence in here that it's the actions that we can take internally are not sufficient to mitigate those losses. Now, I will say that obviously we know that health boards are working on that. We haven't obviously seen the impact of that action yet, but we do know that there are fortnightly meetings, and the team attend those with health boards and with the Peak Ambulance Committee Commissioner. And the aim of those meetings is to identify actions that hospitals can take to reduce ambulance delays. And we know this is an issue which is discussed between Welsh Government and health boards. But clearly, obviously, in terms of the facts of the matter, we haven't seen improvements to date as a result of those actions. We then have a section, so I'll move on from that. We do have a section then on our NETS performance, and actually, we do well, and we've done well throughout the pandemic to continue to get people to their appointments and pick them up in a timely manner, which is really important for that very large group of patients that we see on a daily basis. And it was good. We actually had a session on the NETS service at this focus-on session last month, and that was really good. It's kind of the profile of that service with our commissioners. I think they were pleased with the kind of positive work that we've done in that service, acknowledging that there's more to do as well. So in terms of other parts to bring out from the report, I will go into the workforce metrics. You can see the number of hours that we produced. So as expected in April, those hours went down because the military was mitigating back until the end of March. So we saw a 90% rate in April for our emergency ambulances and 71% for our RRVs. As I say, that was expected. We saw a decrease in April for our abstractions. Yes, they were too high, they were 41%, but that was a decrease from March, which was positive. And you can see that the overall sickness level for the month of March takes a bit longer to get the workforce data through sometimes. So the 10th of March was 11.88%, and obviously that was reflected not just the ambulance response, but also within our control centres, and we know that we do have high levels across all of those areas. I will just touch on post-production lost hours, because this is a matter which is of interest, I think, to commissioners, and we know that we had a good session actually recently at the F&P committee where we talked about this, having a bit of a deep dive. So I think hopefully that was useful, and any other members of the board who would like to see that presentation, more than happy to send that round and explain a little bit about what that was. But we do know that, about 5,500 hours in the last month of post-production lost hours were attributed to return to base for meal breaks, and other data that we've been looking at says that it's about 18 minutes for each of those returns to base. So actually, when we look at it on an individual basis, it's not as high as you might think. But we're continuing to have discussions with our team partners in terms of what the options might be for changing that and other things. But we do know that the gain is small in comparison to other gains, for example, around the handle lost hours. The last thing I think I wanted to just do was just to note, because it's a difficult metric. We know we want to convey less people to hospital. That's an important part of our ability triangles, and the data that we're showing in this report often looks like we're doing that. We are conveying less people, so you can see there we conveyed 34% of our incidents to emergency departments in April 22. The last couple of years has been about the lowest it's ever been. So in some ways you might think that's positive, but what you'll also see in the graph pack is that a lot of the reason for that is that we're not attending as many patients as we would expect to be able to attend. And the reason we're not attending them is because we're having to apply the safety plan. So we know we've got data on the number of patients who formally said to them we're not able to send you an ambulance. But we also know that response times lengthen, the patients make a choice, not unexpectedly, to cancel the ambulance and get their own way to community. And those numbers you'll see in the graph over the last over winter and continuing are very high. About 10,000 patients a month who decide to cancel and presumably make their own way to the hospital. So we have to take a bit of caution in terms of those conveyance numbers, because we do believe that those patients who cancel and who move and who we're not able to send to are probably going to get in the negative anyway. They're just not having had that worked up or discussion with us first. So I'm hoping as part of the metrics we might need to think about how we present some of this, see if we present it in a way that is helpful in what we are doing, what we are able to do positively for those patients. So hopefully that's a helpful run through. As I say, as you mentioned, Martin, it is in patches of our work. We've got extreme pressure. We've got a number of actions that we have in play. Are continuing to take. Hopefully, you can have some assurance there after that discussions are ongoing as we know the commissioners of others in terms of other further actions we may take into course.
Thank you. Very clear and comprehensive coverage of what is a very difficult situation, isn't it? Perfectly plain. I think you've explained some of the contributing factors, and I think that sets the context for the later discussion about, given where we are, given the actions that we have in hand, the concerns, what more do we do? That's what we're going to work through later on, I think, in our private session before we come back to public session later on. Before we leave this, though, we need to make sure we understand context. So are there any questions with Rachel or anything, Jason, actually, if you asked, if you wanted to add to that scenario? I did have one question, which is relativity, if I may, just to, I appreciate that the handover delays are measured in vehicle hours in effect, not. The also are the return to base hours. So relativity, you can see 23,000 hours lost. The handover delays 5,000 to return to base. That gives you an idea of relative scale. Sickness is trickier, firstly because it takes two to clear an ambulance. So we're not necessarily comparing right and right. But secondly, sickness is a phenomenon that doesn't go away. So influenceable sickness is probably about half of the current sickness rate. So just for people's edification, if you like, what's your take on the sort of comparative figure in terms of lost hours for sickness that we believe we can make inroads into? Say if you got to 6%, which is our
we have looked at that. We've got graphs. I think
I just wanted to make sure we're all clear.
Yeah. So if you almost double, if you like, the hospital handling delays is 2 people in each of those groups. So 23,000 hours.
It's 46,000
hours lost in terms of staff.
Yeah.
Similarly, I guess the post-production loss. So that's not all. Because some of the post-production loss is RRBs, etc. But the equivalent, I think. At the moment, hospital handling delays trump everything. I mean, that is without question. But we do know that the sickness levels, even if we got to 6%, say, I think it's probably about 20,000 hours we could save. So that's comparison to 46,000 if we, The exact numbers I haven't got for the last couple of months, but it's important that we improve our sickness, and you know that. But of course, there's a correlation because part of the reason our staff are unwell and stressed and not able to come to work is because of these very long handling delays and the distressing nature of attending a patient being able to do a very long time as a result of CCL. So it's a difficult, yes, there's things we can do on sickness, but we have to accept that there is an element of it that is driven by the hospital handling delays as well.
Thank you. I mean, that's important to picture.
I mean, a couple of things, Chairman, as you've asked, you kind of invited me to make comment. So the starting point for me is that there are far too many patients waiting far too long in the community every day currently. Those delays are unacceptable, and as you would have heard me say before, both collectively, publicly, but also privately to individual patients and their relatives that I and others on the team see and talk to. We recognise they're unacceptable. We unreservedly apologise for those delays. It's not the service that we want to be providing to all of our patients across Wales. And we are working very hard. I didn't say that before, but we are working hard, both in terms of what we can practically do ourselves to ease the pressure, on the stuff that we can control, but also to influence system partners to take action to, arrest and mitigate too. On our own, for the things that are within our control that we absolutely have to focus on. Rachel touched on the roster review is one. Managing compassionately and carefully given the pressure of the sickness issue. But we do have to see attendance improve. That said, what I think is important to recognise, of course, is that we are not the only service in this position, and we know that there is substantial pressure in many of the other services across the UK from the same issue that we have. Pressure across emergency care resulting in emergency department handover delays and therefore response delays and difficulties. So we're not alone in this, and we're also not alone in the level of sickness that we have. There are other services across the UK that have higher sickness rates than we do currently. And if you benchmarked us nationally across the UK, you would find us in the middle to the upper kind of quartile, if you like, not the top. We're not the worst. But we do have work to do to improve that over time. And we should recognise that it's not going to happen quickly. do this sensitively and carefully over a number of months to start to see that reduction. But other things we can do practically, we've touched on these before as well. We've got cohorting in place subject to available funds and conservative these. We've got, unrestricted overtime for our people, who want to work overtime, both in the contact centre, but also operationally. Because what we have seen, and you might want to comment on this, is a reduction in overtime take up because of the workplace experience that we've described. We need to press on the roster review. We've made good strides, as Rachel touched on the consultant close or the retreat target, and we can stretch that a little further. We think now we've got ECNS in and the growth in the capacity of ECNS is all in. So there are things that we are doing, have done, and are doing to ease the pressure, but we continue to lobby hard the rest of the system to generate improved flow and therefore improvements for us. As we touched on in the closed session later, we'll get much more detail on that about what we are doing and what other we can take.
Yeah, very much really helpful. So we're painting the picture of context here to inform the discussion we had then about what more. This is very important. Paul, sorry, you're having that ages ago.
Yeah, no, that's fine, Chair. I just wanted for the audience to recognise that all of these metrics or measures are dealt with in committees. This isn't the first time that we see these, and this isn't the level of scrutiny we apply to these. We are much more in committees, which I'm still I just wanted to ask the question, and again, it's for board members not aware of that, more for our audience. The clinical indicators are not reported since last November on there, and I just think it would be worthwhile everyone understanding why they're not. I understand why they're not, but it would be useful because it appears there's a gap in the clinical indicators scores.
Yes. I don't know whether Andy or essentially it's due to the introduction of the PCR, and kind of as we go through the process of fully embedding that, we'll then come back online. But I don't know if there's apologies. I should have mentioned that.
No problem. I mean, essentially, it comes down to the clinical indicator scores are all collected from the patient records at each of the clinicians. They're complete rather than to medication. And as we move from DigiPen and paper-based system into electronic patient record, there's that point where we switch over. Now, there's a negative on the method of collection will probably change as to how they look. It's worth mentioning at this stage that as an on-start report, that our first set of those starting to filter through. They are going to look different, so that there is going to be steps where things don't necessarily look exactly as they did in the way that natural, the natural transfer from one to the other, because the method of collection isn't essentially changed. So I think it's worth mentioning that work is in progress and we're starting to see the first of those metrics.
I think there's also a bit of a follow-up question. What other measures have we got to ensure that patients, that care is being done, if it's not recorded at all, extracted from the DigiPen? I don't know if Brendan wants to comment on that.
Yeah, I can pick up some of that. So, firstly, as Andrew was saying, there are some glitches that are almost inevitable when you introduce new IT systems. So we are aware of the reduction of the reporting that's been coming through on the indicators, and we've got a group now looking at that, and specifically looking to ensure that the quality of the care hasn't been impacted, and how do we then improve the recording. So that is in hand. In terms of the harm to patients, of course, there are national audits that we participate in, and there's feedback from the PDs that contribute to that. So, for example, one of the areas that I would pick up is the stroke indicator. Obviously, with the delays that we're seeing, there have been concerns about stroke patients not getting to hospitals in time for some clinical interventions. So Andy and I met with representatives from the Stroke Association yesterday to look at what we could do to improve that. And I met last week with Shakti Rana, Dr. Shakti Rana, who's the national lead for stroke, who is putting together a project looking at utilising some new technology to improve the stroke pathway. So I've got people now linking into that so that if we can participate, then the pre-hospital element of that we will fully participate. And there are pieces of work like that going on under all of the clinical areas. So we're not seeing any reported deterioration in the quality of care that we're providing, although it's recognised that some of the delays that patients are seeing are unacceptable.
Thank you.
Thank you, Brendan. Is that the point you
That's the point.
Right, so, okay, Lee, then Dave, let me try to pull this together.
Thanks, Chair. I just wanted to try and offer some comments to sort of bring us right up to speed, recognising that some of the metrics in here are to April and are particularly poor. So with that in mind, if I just go through a couple of the areas of the business. Rachel was quite right to draw attention to 999 forehand performance, and one of our biggest challenges in that part of the operation. It's a shame we've not heard that staff story, because that really would have set some context about the experience that staff have had there, and I think there's a direct consequence to that in terms of the attendance, because across the department that's the worst area for attendance. At the moment, sitting at about 15% sickness. What's been good though is we have been seeing some stabilisation of demand. I think some of that has been helped by some improved response performance in May, so there'll be less recallers into the line. But we are seeing performance now that hasn't been seen since about July last year. It will pick up. So that's quite pleasing to see. And my thanks go to the team who've been working in such high pressure. I just want to touch on something on production, which is the urgent care service production. We've seen some very solid urgent care production over the last through the pandemic. Mostly support, well not mostly, but there's been additional support from St John's, our partner. Now the funding for that didn't come across into this year, and so we are seeing lower ECS production coming to this financial year. But that, of course, now being offset coming into May with growth in our ENT numbers. It's been good to see them come onto the roster. But recognising that's precisely about 83, so we were anticipating 100, which is good. But recognising through the challenging winter months, we were supported by 250 military. So the number doesn't correlate. Now we are seeing, I think, some benefits of the stabilisation of activity and its capacity, particularly pleasing to see in our anger response times, but they are not yet as good as they were with that quantum of military support during those months. But we are seeing an improvement coming into May. I just wanted to touch on consultant close, because of course our 15% is our ambition, our aim. Our achievable 10.2% was achieved last year, so we know we've got good capability. Getting to 15% can be relying on two matters. The first is capacity, which we know we've supported with the additional clinicians going to CSD. Now, there's a correlation here as well with our UCS production, because whilst last year those places were funded, this year there's been a redirection, and so we do have a shortfall now in our establishment for UCS. So UCS will not be supported at the moment by the St John's capacity or what was previously funded to enable the additional staff to support this. So we should anticipate some reduced production in UCS now in the coming months. The team is working on a sustainability plan to sustain those CSD staff numbers, but also starting to look at how we can flow more activity so that we can push ourselves towards that 15%. And of course, ECNS is just deployed, so we need to allow the team some headroom to come to become comfortable with that, and then for us to actually understand what we're making for the way to go forward. On NEPS, the team have been working really hard to attain financial balance for NEPS, and that has meant some applications or some more robust application of eligibility criteria. But the first couple of months are looking very pleasing for NEPS colleagues. The lost hour position, of course, as mentioned, whilst we've seen some of these improvements, stabilisation of activities and reduction in patient wait times, I can't report that we've been seeing significant improvements in lost hours, still around 5,000 hours a week. So I anticipate us to be 20,000 for this month, unfortunately.
Thank you. Really good to add that to the historical report to get your insight in. Thank you. I think, David, you've got the last.
Thanks.
Well, you have a unique perspective to bring. So
Just a small point, really. It was just in relation to the handling of delays. Obviously, you're recognising the morale of staff, but it was just to highlight the concern of skill decay as well with the staff. Particularly as we go longer and longer through this, with new staff trying to consolidate what they've learned in the university and not getting exposure to the hospital space. So just one of those factors which is adding to that going forward.
I think that's a very valid point. One that if you work in acute hospitals, you very much recognise as a key consideration. But a couple of elements of discussion, keeping on top of the clinical indicators, making sure the actual clinical service offered is at tops, and reminding ourselves of that factor. Still, they're both important considerations in this discussion. It's not just about response time.
Yeah.
Okay, that's been a really useful discussion, which I hope will bring everybody to the equivalent point of understanding where we can consider, okay, what more to do. It's incumbent upon us, I think, given the people we serve. So let's draw this stage of the discussion to a close. The regular report, I think we're asked to consider and discuss the report and determine whether sufficient assurance has been obtained, further information is required, or action required. The purpose of this meeting, I think we probably ought to say that we fulfil those recommendations, but saying that we're actually taking the actions into the subsequent meeting, aren't we? Yeah. So if you're happy that we reflect that in the minutes in some form, I think the report provides us with the information we need. We gain assurance about the information in terms of action. That's unfinished business. Are we happy with that as a conclusion? Okay.
Perhaps just need to we're obviously listening to everything.
Yes,
But we understand why that is, but that we can't take assurance on that because it's not there.
that's fair comment. Thank you. Yeah, good point. That should be loud clear evidence. Okay, we move from that report to the committee feedback reports. I'm just conscious of time, but I think we really need to give majority time for those at the head of the next with respect to the committee straight down. For example, REM, I can cover 2 words. The top level committee's got a lot to say about what we've just been discussing. So we'll keep going. I think we rightly begin with the quality request. And over to you, Beth.
Thank you, Chair. So at our meeting 2 weeks ago now, on the 12th of May, we were joined by colleagues from outside of Wales. We had people there from Health Inspectorate Wales, from Audit Wales, from Community Health Council and the NHS Delivery Unit. So we had quite a lot of people joining us at this meeting. Within the alert section of the report, I think it's fair to say up front that the meeting was dominated by very many reports which conveyed the significant pressures we will be under for a long period now, and also wider NHS system pressures. And specifically for our committee is the impact on patients, especially related to handover delays, which I know we've referred to already during today's meeting. We received the report from the delivery unit, the appendix B report, which Rachel referred to earlier, whereby the framework is agreed to reporting serious incidents specifically related to handling delays. And it's fair to say that this report does present a very, very stark picture. And I won't go into further detail at this point, Chair, because I know we are discussing that later. We also received a notification of 2Z28 coroner report, prevention of future deaths. And it's interesting, for the last 12 months, we haven't received any of those. So these were the first 2 since May last year. Within the patient safety highlight report, there were several examples to indicate the very high level of system pressures and the impact on individuals. However, there were some positives within the report, and as an example, our timeliness to respond to the complaints within 30 days. So that had improved in that previous quarter, and we've had hit our target for the first time in quite a while, because obviously the level of complaints have increased as the system pressures have continued to increase throughout. Within the advice section of the report, we had a really interesting, quite a different patient story for us, I have to say. We heard from a son whose mum had repeatedly fallen over a period of many months, and each time he called us out to help lift his mum off the floor. And he realised that the pressures that we were all under, and he wanted to do something to help us and help the wider community and other people who needed our services. So he decided to try to raise funds locally to buy a manga chair, which is what our staff would use when they go out to help lift people after the fall. And he was successful in doing that. So that was really positive to see that somebody had gone to that degree, I suppose, to help his mum, but also help the wider system pressure. With regards to our quality strategy, which we approved in May last year, we have feedback on that and progress against it at every meeting request. And whilst there were some areas of progress achieved, it's fair to say that because of the ongoing pressures on all of our colleagues across VAST, progress has been hampered over the recent months. One of the things to note from that is, within the quality strategy, part of what was proposed was that we would appoint senior quality leads to work across VAST. And clearly, because of the challenging financial picture that we operate in this year as well, we haven't received funding for those posts this year. However, the committee was assured that we are all looking at internal resources to see if we can use any of those to introduce some of those posts. But the one important point to make with the quality strategy, again, the committee was clear in emphasising the importance of everybody owning quality. This isn't just for quality staff, people with that word in the title, it's for everyone working across that. With regards to our committee priorities, Trust Board will already know that we have set our one priority previously around the duty of quality and duty of conduct. But what we did do in this meeting was have a discussion around whether the wording, as we stated it previously, was appropriately clear for everybody to understand. We wanted to make sure that members of the public and other colleagues understood within our intent is to ensure that we link that directly with incidents of patients' harms and safety and avoidable harm. So we have reworded that committee priority. It's the same in essence, but the wording is different and hopefully helpful. Within the issuer section of the report, we did consider the monthly integrated performance report, which Rachel has covered in detail, so I won't add anything there. Secondly, we looked at the PEPI report, and that's always a very positive report, and this meeting was no different. We heard about the many positive examples of engagement that the team has had with numerous individuals, both virtually, and we've started to attend face-to-face meetings now as well, which is really good. So we received lots of positive feedback. And at the start of the meeting today, I think I made a comment about the palliative care team, and there really was a gem of a quote in that in terms of feedback. And the final sentence, which I still want to read out, please forgive me, I won't read the whole quote, is this experience has left us with very precious memories, and we all felt that that's fulfilling. So it was lovely to see that in the midst of so many other challenges really. We received an overview of RED performance, and I guess the key message from that the committee took was there's no indication that the RED demand is going to reduce anytime soon. We clearly reviewed our risks, and obviously Quest has two of the highest scoring risks for VAST 223 and 224, and they remain at the highest score possible of 25. What I'd like to say at the end, really, Chair, if I can, before opening up for comments or questions, is despite the very wide difficult reports we considered and the highly emotive content of those, and understandably so, the committee did recognise the continuing hard work of all of the staff across VAST, and I feel that is important to mention and acknowledge because
we recognise what's been happening and they continue to come to work. It's been taking a toll on people, but they still continued to deliver exceptional service and support to people when they arrive at people's homes. And we have so much evidence to prove that within the factory report and everything. So on that basis, what we did have was assurance that, you know, we within that and officers are doing absolutely everything they can to deliver the best possible services despite the constraints and challenges. At that point, I'm going to stop, Chair, and open up for questions or comments.
Well, that was a great summary of what was obviously a very intense and challenging meeting, but it was important, but it's great that you're carrying the torch for patient safety throughout. And also there's some good news amongst the challenges we face. Any other comments or reflections? But I think that puts context to the earlier discussion very well. We'll need to come back to later, because it's that safety angle that has to be paramount in our considerations. I'm happy to take the report as articulated. I think it's important we voice that picture, actually. In a way, it doesn't need question, it was very clear. Okay. Excellent. I mean, this proves very clear this mechanism feeding back to the committee with that substance. It's extremely beneficial. Moving on to finance performance. Now, Kevin's not here, so sure this is going to be a stand-up routine.
He's asked Chris and myself for feedback and committee. Who wants to start?
I'll just kick off quickly then. So, take the paper as read, Chair, and some of this you've already covered already. Obviously, as we know, it overlaps in the conversations that I held with three committees in those couple of weeks leading up to today and the discussion we'll have later. So I won't repeat anything that has been said by others. Rachel reference earlier to the particular deep dive that was the committee around production hours, which I think was very well received and very beneficial for all those independence. In terms of some of the financial aspects of the finance performance committee, we've got a couple of pages later which I'll present. I'll repeat that. Now, the other areas I just wanted to flag myself was the mobile data vehicle solution business case, which we're just on the cusp of getting agreement, I think, all from government. We've seen some suggestions that that's going to be sort of approved in the next few days. But this is the committee received a gateway review or project assessment review on that, as you can see. A standard general item of the decarbonization action plan was brought through, and progress around some of that. Much more work to do, but some good progress being made. And interestingly, the building we're today now as part of the enhancements of this building. We've done quite a lot of things that we know this would come in, but the roof is full of PV. It's got pods ready for electric chargers. It was storage room down there. There's a number of storage batteries that are storing the solar panel generated power. So we're doing all we can in that. A really interesting subject I presented a brief update on the introduction of IFRS 16 in terms of accounting for leases, which the committee were riveted by. And as I say, I'll pick up some of the financial aspects in a bit. We touched on the integrated loss of a lot of detail already on the performance report to make sure it's done with the committee as well. And we did have an update on the delivery of the year-end 2022 INTP, which we're also picking up on the agenda today. As with other committees, we reviewed the risks relevant to that committee and looked at the risks, including the increasing risk of financial performance, which I'll come back to in my reports later, and we reviewed the standards of audit recommendations into the report. Not sure if there anything specifically on top of that, Kevin asked you to sort of.
No, I think you covered it, Chris. Kevin was particularly concerned about the financial outlook for the challenging matters for the current year and next year, and also around the performance statistics, which we discussed in every committee and at the room today. So I don't think there was anything further we wanted to add.
Okay, thank you. Let's work on the assumption we'll keep this alongside us when we get to the financial report in particular, because we've obviously let that chunk of the discussion aside, and I've been very clear from Kevin that there are risks like that financials for this year, which we need to be clear on as it is progressive. So we're happy to receive the report as is. You can decide as we go on and make something financials. Okay, People and Culture Committee, Paul, back on your feet, please.
Thank you, Chair. As with the other committees, we spent quite a lot of time talking about the current pressures on the service and its effect on staff. And it is a pity that we're unable to hear our staff doing the work, because we heard some of it already in hand at the committee. So in the alert section, it was really about understanding the system pressures and its effect on staff. And our endeavours to improve absence rates, but recognising that the environment in which our staff are trying to work is extremely difficult. PADR, we have raised that a number of times at board. We still see that the PADR target is being missed. A revised approach to PADRs has been developed, and we also need to look at how we monitor and acknowledge PADRs that are taking place. So we're looking at the electronic staff record as a way of doing that, because we talked previously about PADR rights, and we talked about well-being conversations. And it's clear, actually, from discussion within the committee, those are happening, but it's not being recorded anywhere. So we want to make sure that we can capture those conversations so that we are clear that staff are being supported. On the advice area, we had a great staff story from Lisa O'Sullivan, senior parliament in Cardiff Vale. She was talking about her role and giving us an insight into the work she does. Significant amount of work, both operational, delivering services, but also supporting staff. We're getting really good feedback from colleagues who are being supported by Lisa in her role. One area, and I know Beth will be interested in this, that we discussed at the committee was the return of spontaneous circulation, where we've had lower achievement than we would have expected, and she gave us evidence that have increased significantly because she is sent now to those places, and it's improved from around 8.5% to 40% after the introduction of the role. She also talked about challenges, to be fair to her, the role allocation, making sure that particularly when cases have been allocated, everyone understands her role. She felt that it was a new role and people weren't quite getting it in terms of where they would dispatch her to. She talked about geographical spread. Cardiff Vale is quite big, particularly the Vale area, and there should be 4 of them in around 2 senior paramedics. And the workload, we actually talked quite a lot about quality of access to the role, and whether as a lady she was experiencing difficulties in undertaking the role. And she was very positive, actually. The flexibility was there, and there was nothing really preventing others from undertaking the role. So it was a very good staff story, and she was delightful in terms of her, was really enthusiastic about it. We had a quarterly update from with Introductory Remarks from me. And again, we talked about staff well-being. And I think Craig raised a question or made a comment that our well-being offer is really good as an ambulance service. But we weren't quite sure that everyone was taking up the offers that were available to them and how to spread that with. So we had a lot of discussion around that. And as I said, we were scheduled to have the staff stories today. Health and safety has transferred from quality efficiency committee to ourselves, and for the first time we've ever improved the transformation of programme working safely, and it was a very good paper and actually laid out the business cycle for us around health and safety. So Trish and myself and others will work on that and how that's brought back to people in the culture community. We talked about the risks related and increasing the score of the risk related to community partnerships, but actually felt in the community that our partnership working is really good. Yeah, there are some tricky issues that we are trying to work through with different perspectives, obviously, but we did receive the trade union partnership annual report and it's appended to this paper. And if we look at it, the amount of partnership workers going to be significant, and I wouldn't want the board hardship of the they are, but there are challenges, obviously. We also talked about our process and our operational experience of disciplinary cases. We've had some challenges in the past, and we talked about the respective resolution policy, a relatively new policy in HSB laws. But we also talked about how we perhaps make the process easier for staff and doing that process, and also for management colleagues who are trying to undertake that process. And we talked about the just culture, which I know Catherine and the team are starting to think about how we embed that within the trust. But there were lessons to be learned from the disciplinary cases that we looked at, particularly around the intervention and understanding that a face-to-face conversation may actually stop some of them progressing with disciplinary route. Anna joined us for our first meeting, and that was really good to have Anna's contribution. And we also recognised that Andrew Challenger, the Assistant Director of Professional Education and Training, it was his last meeting, and it's a trust, so we thank him for all the work that he's done and the transformation that he's been undertaken within the education and training department. Obviously, on the issue, we spent a lot of time talking about sickness, absence levels, and improved attendance. We looked at the work programme and the action plans, as Rachel alluded to earlier. We're pleased to know that they were on track, and we've asked for more details of the meeting. Obviously, it's being monitored through the EOT on a fortnightly basis, and we're about to go to scrutiny in terms of its progress at the times. We also looked at the audit tracker. Pleased to report there was more outstanding recommendations for the committee, and we had an internal audit conclusion, which received a reasonable assurance, so we're pleased with that. We did raise one query as whether the audit programme had actually taken into account the Welsh language within the quality diversity and inclusion hadn't necessarily. So we've just made sure that that is picked up through the Welsh language group as part of its ongoing work, and perhaps including with future audits. And lastly, we talked about the significant increase in translation costs, information through the Welsh language advisory group, and that there is this being to look at in-house provision. And on the private session, we reviewed the suspensions over 4 months. There were 6 employees in that group, recognising that it was quite complex, those cases, and there were other non-trust agencies involved in most of them, which prevented us from closing those. Talk about the risks. We increased obviously the risk around absence rates, and I also mentioned we increased the risk around triggering partnerships, but recognising there are strong partnerships in place. That's the only questions.
Covered a huge amount, I would say. With lots of different angles on our staff. Yes.
Thank you.
Sorry. I think you pointed something out.
No. I've got one. Okay. Okay, so Paul, it's pleasing to, it's more of an observation and perhaps just a little bit of history for relatively new board members. So it's pleasing to see the committee hearing from senior paramedic colleagues. I just want to wind back in time a bit about. So you know, we chose a couple of years ago as part of a package arrangement that we agreed with trade unions to transition from the old clinical team leader role to the new duty operations manager role, to introduce the senior paramedic role. Now, we chose to do that because we recognise the importance of clinical supervision and supporting our people as their roles change and broaden, but also to improve outcomes and the quality of service approaching us through that clinical supervision. Of course, we didn't receive, this is the important bit I think for the board to remember, is we didn't receive additional resources to do that from commissioners. So we've chosen to prioritise existing internal resources that we have to introduce that new role, and the commitment was to grow it over time. So we do recognise and understand that not everywhere has got an equal complement of single paragraphs at the moment. That's simply because the additional resources weren't forthcoming, and we're having to grow that over a period of years from prioritising resources that are available to us. So I just want to make a point, Paul, for the newer colleagues that we are committed to it. It is an important feature of the workforce, not only in terms of that immediate supervision, but also the opportunity for people to grow and progress within our organisation. But to get to the final establishment, we've got a couple of years to go.
If I can come out, I think what's clear is the evidence that the positive evidence that rule is in place. We've had it through kind of in North Wales, we now see it being spread in other parts of the world. So it's just, I hope commissioners understand the benefit of that rule. I think it's huge when you look at the evidence that's coming from the what the board push that with commissioners.
That's very helpful. It's all about corporate revenue, that is the job of getting the commitment over time to increase the number of posts in that role. Great. Sorry.
Yeah, just saying, thank you, Chair. 2 points really. One, just as a response to the TU risk register raise, I think it's a reflection of the challenging times that we are within, not a reflection of the actual relationships between both parties. And I think we just need to acknowledge that this is about the drive for efficiencies internally. The challenges that we're all facing, the staff exhaustion coming out of a pandemic, but not a reflection of where we are in terms of our relationship between both parties. And actually, one of the things I'd like to say thank you to the exec and our non-exec colleagues for the very recent sub-board meetings has been a reflection on the pressures that staff are under, and that has been acknowledged across all those committees. And whereas we're normally having to raise those concerns, we've actually sat quietly in most of those meetings because those concerns have been raised by yourselves. With, yes, still the challenges that we've got for modernisation and the sickness, but it's been done in a very compassionate and sensitive way, as opposed to the drive for inefficiencies without due regard for the staff. So just to acknowledge that, yes, there's a risk, but that's because of the pressure, not because of the relationship, and it has been acknowledged across all those support committees. There's a focus on staff well-being, and yes, again, Catherine and her team, that provision has been fantastic and is increasing, and I know we're still working on the well-being. I won't call it a policy, because that may well be changing, the well-being provision. So thank you.
Thanks, Graham, for that. That's a really important point. Any other reflections? We're happy to receive that report there on that basis. Very comprehensive and clear. Okay, good. Thank you. Thanks for that, Paul. We now move on to academic partnership. I've got the same struggle that Kevin is absent. I suspect this might be you again, Paul.
Yeah, we had a discussion on what really wanted to pick up was the end of life care. We had explained to us in the partnership committee the role of the number of people who were not conveyed and had a compassionate end of life experience, and the families that came to those people. It was just quite incredible. In terms of the report itself, it's I'm sure people have read it. There were no alerts from the committee. We still wait for confirmation from Welsh Government in relation to our university status application. We have had some discussion previously about Tribune and Partners joining the committee, and this is the first time that Tribune and Partners did join the committee, so that's good. Communication through STEL, particularly with Welsh Government, continues. We're still having discussions with University of Wales regarding academia representation, but think that's a little slow, I have to say. Probably will improve when we've had confirmation or otherwise of our application. In terms of the assurance, as I said, it was mainly around the end of life service and consecutive appeals, aspects of the care.
Good, good. That's great news. Ever going with the stars and it's good to hear that. So, presented. So,
Yeah, thank you, Martin, and actually, just put that camera on. Yes, just things I wanted to add really. Delighted to have both Craig and Mark Marston join us from the convenience side and Hannah from the non-exec side. And I think it's fair to say, Paul, that was the first meeting where I felt we were getting into the meat of what the Academic Partnership Committee is going to be about now. We had a real solid agenda. I think for the last 9 months, we've been feeding our way with it, but we're starting to get into a rhythm now, particularly in terms of the priorities that we have identified to push forward via the INCP, and they all figure in the INCP and Marlborough's account. So I think that was all good. It was also the last meeting for our erstwhile assistant director and challenger who left us, and we've also agreed that given all the developments in Matrix around training, so Matrix House in Swansea are based there, that we'll endeavour to try and hold our next meeting in person at Matrix, so we can really see that come to life as part of an intrinsic element of what we're doing in that committee.
that'd be brilliant. It's well worth a visit.
Yeah, I forgot one important area, and that was around the apprenticeships. We did have a lot of discussion about our ability to increase our apprenticeship role, recognising there are differences between the organisations in terms of access and funding, but it is on our agenda, and we are very keen to pursue the opportunities that come along over the next couple of years. It's not unlikely to change really before 2025, but it is on our agenda to move forward. So that's going to really
That's an important one. It has raised quite a stir in most ambulance institutes, so the funding difference here explains that would pursue a separate path, if you like.
Yeah.
Okay. Excellent. That's really helpful. It's good to get that sense that the committee's generating its own agenda. We've got two partners there at the moment, which is brilliant. Okay. We're happy to receive that report. Yeah. Okay. Musical chairs with these presentations. A charitable funds committee. Now, Kerry's not here today. I think Becca, you're covering this one.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Which is an interesting ask because I wasn't able to make the meeting. I'm probably spoken with Kerry though, so I'm going to come to Stella and Chris to help me out. I'm sure they will. Kerry wanted the attention brought just to the first point really in the lead section. And that's with regards to us engaging a charity consultant, which we obviously did previously. However, we have decided that we are going to retain to that because of conflict of interest that's arisen between the preferred consultant and the chair of the committee. So the committee did agree, and in fairness, although I couldn't make the meeting, Kerry asked me for my thoughts as well, and it was unanimously agreed to wish the tender. Noting that this will delay the start of the bill. And obviously it's important for us because we want to have somebody to kind of help us identify the future direction for us, for the charity. So beyond that one alert, Chair, I am going to pass to Estelle or Chris. Chris is holding his hand.
That's fine. Thank you, Beth. Okay, Chair, just quickly, only a couple of things I wanted to, just to add to that first point, the retained slide. Back out is in progress. Good. A couple of others I just wanted to flag from the meeting under the advice section, in particular the bursary panel. It was really pleasing. We were finally able to sort of bring through so a number of and approve the for a number of bids. It's a fairly modest amount in total financially, but they have been waiting a while for obvious reasons for some of these. Because of obviously the last couple of years in terms of the the ability for us to progress them, but also what they afford and not have actually been able to have been undertaken in the last couple of years. So that was pleasing to see, and the fact that we've agreed now as well to hopefully make this a bit more of a smoother and more seamless process going forward. The ability and the region to reference for delegate authority to be given to the BSC panel to approve it at a certain level, but then there's always envelope to be reviewed that goes through. And the only other thing I was going to mention, which you mentioned at the start, Chair, I think was it's picked up in the sort of fund balance element of the issue was the definition of that asset of the ambulance for Aberystwyth. And my personally, I guess, from my perspective to the finance and food teams who were sort of behind the scenes, sort of making that happen. And it's quite unusual. Health boards have donated assets, and you'll see when they come out of the accounts, the way which we have to account for that. In the accounts for 2022, then we can bring them back into the next time. But it's an unusual transaction for us. So the health boards have donated assets in the accounts quite often, but it's the first time we've had a specific significant related asset in that way. So the teams have had to sort of find a way through that a little bit, and that's the way so for making that happen.
Thank you. Any reflections? I thought was just passing through my mind with changes at board that we ought to have a session at some point and along as trustees.
Probably about the board.
Yes. So we've got that advantage, yeah. Any other comments? Good to see also looking at the devolution of funds potentially to fund managers.
I think so. This is the first committee that I attended. That's always always interesting, isn't it? I think it might be never quite good, but anyway, we're both very early on, and really interesting to see the scope of development in this area, around charity. And I think just noting that the consultant is going to work with us to provide a range of options around really small, sort of, if we want to grow a little bit, if we want to grow a lot, and to get that to where we go with that. So, yeah, that's very interesting meeting, and it will be interesting to look at how that develops and to what extent we want to back to that work.
Yeah, really good stage of ambition from the table, so it's a good chance to be part of that. Thank you. Are we happy on that basis? A positive report to receive that one. Good, okay. The last report, the chair of the committee is here, it's me. It's a bizarrely short item, one advisory, which is, as is required, we met to approve the remuneration of the newly appointed executive director of quality nursing. There's no name, so I'm not sure the status of the appointment announcement here.
We've made an announcement.
Okay, so
Start date for Liam Williams, who will join us on the 1st of August.
as we're, I thought that was good. So business stuff, appointment made, that's important. Excellent. I hope you're happy to receive that report. It would be very awkward. Thank you. Okay. Now, bizarrely, I think we made the break slightly ahead of time, albeit by not having received the video. But I suggest we can go in a fair while. Should we take our break now, 15 minutes, come back at 11:50? Is that right? 10 to 12. Okay. Good. Thank you. Thank you. Now move on to the risk management corporate risk register report, which is over to you to introduce, Trish.
Thank you, Chair. So the outcome of the work that's been done in the last few months to strengthen and rearticulate the corporate risks is evident in this paper, including the titles, summary descriptions, and scores which the trust board is asked to know. In addition to the headlines of the corporate risks in Annex 1, comprehensive risk assessments are being done, questioning leakage control and related assurance, identifying gaps in these and any further actions to mitigate the risk. These will be more evident in the transitional back that will be reported to the audit committee on the 7th of June. along with the forward program of work for risk transformation that's in the IMTP as well. So as a result of the work on corporate risks, 3 scores have increased. So the first is risk 160, which is the high absence rates impacting on patient safety, staff wellbeing, and the trust's ability to provide a safe and effective service. The board will see that this has increased from a 16 to 20, so a 4/4 to a 5/4. And that's to reflect the significant negative impact of absence on service delivery, which impedes the trust's ability to reach patients. The second risk, corporate risk, it increases 201, damage to trust reputation following a loss of stakeholder confidence, and this has increased from a 15 to a 20. As the ability to mitigate issues outside of the organisation within WAST's control, these are contributing to the effects on the trust reputation. The third corporate risk to increase in score is 245, failure to have sufficient capacity at an alternate site for EMS clinical contact centres, which could cause a breach of statutory business continuity regulations. This has increased from 15 to 16, given the potential impacts on patients and staff. The board will see that we've included the risk matrices in this report so that you can see the detail of the changes in consequence and likelihood in the papers to provide a bit more further context for the changes in scores. The newly articulated risks and the risk assessments and the increases in scores have been agreed by the risk owners. They've been reviewed by the ADLT and the EMT, and the corporate risks relevant to their remit have been reviewed by the People and Culture Committee, the Finance and Performance Committee, and the Quality Patient Experience and Safety Committee in May, as well, as you can see in the highlight reports. And lastly, Chair, the Trust has received recently undergone an internal audit review on risk management and assurance and received a reasonable rating.
Thank you. Well, that's a very clear report. I did like the if-then resulting in style of analysis. It's very stark, which it needs to be. So I think that's a welcome clarification of what this is about. So I guess our job is to say, what's this report telling us? You've highlighted 3 risk areas which there's a clear message. I suspect some of this might be about the risk of catching up, but others might be about the actual fundamental risk altering. Would that be a fair?
Yes, it is, Chair. So with the re-articulation of the risks and if then resulting in, and a re-look at the controls, so a fresh look at controls and assurances have changed some of the scores, and some of them have changed in consequence as well, which is an unusual event, but it's because we have re-articulated them and looked at them afresh. And you'll see all of that detail come through in the June Audit Committee report, and then again in July in boards, and we'll see that full detail.
Okay, let's see comments. I've got one comment, which is about a third of those risks. It's altered the EMS clinical contact centre risk. It's really a very basic question of understanding. The things you need to know about that, the significance of that risk. It's only a 1 point change. So I guess there's nothing fundamental altered, which would use that. I guess your take on what we're staring at here.
Yeah, Chair, I think it's so it's been a very changing position for CCC, particularly over the pandemic. Because we've had to create space to meet some of the social distancing requirements. But what the risk is, and of course with that we've had some growth. We've had some additional services that have needed to be provided. For example, the 111 first aspect of rollout 111, just to name a few. What this means for us, and the risk really is around business continuity potential. So were we, for example, to lose a sector for a technological or environmental problem, it's about ability for opposite centres to consume the activity and bring in the people to sustain their service. I think that it's much more problematic in our smaller centres, but of course we've had some growth occurring. So our Central West Centre has had some growth that's gone alongside. expansion of the distancing for the pandemic, as has the beauty repurposing of our front house. So we've got additional floor spaces available to us there. Our North Centre is not quite so fortunate. In terms of the steps going to deal with this, we've had some very fresh conversations in relation to the development of a strategy for our contact centre environments. And that will now be picked up through the estate SOC group initially to establish the task and finish group to bring minds and expertise together to develop the options and opportunities, particularly within the gift of our own estate now. So I do think that there will be some, there'll be some potential for less financial constraints to develop a sustainable solution to some of these issues. So that's generally where it sits, Chair. Hopefully we'll make some progress through establishing task and finish group.
That's really helpful. Give you an understanding of what is actually trying to hopefully be able to address this funding committee. Any other comments on the report? Okay. I think that's success, Trish. It follows very well with previous discussions in particularly the operational context, isn't it, with this escalator, so it fits together. And as I say, that if then resulting in approach drawing out the significance of what we're looking at. So we're asked to, let's go back to the recommendation. Consider the report, which we've done, and to note the following, which are the re-articulated risks. And you can see the changes there, the 3 risks escalated in score. Are we happy to receive those and note that? Yeah. Okay, thank you. Thanks, Trish, for it's just developing all the time, so it's good to see that emerging. Okay, let's move on to, we've held back on money, haven't we, Chris? Held back. I think it's worthy of coverage.
Thank you, Chair. So this, I typically I've got 2 finance performance papers on the agenda for today. It's not usual I do that, but I thought it was the first time I've done it in this way, I think. But I thought it was helpful and important actually for completeness and governance to bring through the month 12 for the 21-22 financial year. I'm mindful that I think in previous years, we have a March board where we consider a month 11 position, then we have an April board and we're into month 1 of the year, it's right time what happened between that. Then we bring the accounts through for the previous year in a different board setting. So just for completeness, and I took this paper through Finance Performance Committee as well on the 16th of May. So there was I'll leave you around numbers. But I just thought it was helpful rather than perhaps just bolted onto the month 1 paper, which I think is what I've done in previous years. I will just for completeness, as I say, bring the month 12 final year end position, all subject to audit still. And I will say that for a week or so. In terms of the delivery of our financial performance, both capital and equity for the 21-22 financial year. No surprises in the outturn, as you know, it's around what was previously recorded, what was previously reported, and what was previously forecast, particularly in the last half of the year. It aligns clearly to the draft accounts then that we submitted into Welsh Government and Audit Wales on 29th of April, which are continuing to be subject to the detailed audit by Audit Wales for another 3 days at least. That is going well. No issues have been flagged to me as part of that audit process at all yet. There will be, as there often is, there will be that some minor adjustments that we will make to the draft accounts that we submitted in terms of presentation or disclosures and notes and a bit of moving and a bit of realignment of values within some totals. But I've got a closure meeting with Audit Wales colleagues at some of my team on Monday, ahead of us there, obviously bringing the fully audited accounts and the audit opinion from Audit Wales on the accounts to audit committee on the 7th of June, and then we've got the opportunity to hopefully approve and sign off those accounts. So I wasn't going to say anything more. It is what it is. It's clearly gone. I know 6 weeks is go now, but I thought it was important just to bring that paper through for governance reasons. I'll pause there briefly if that's okay. Yeah. Before moving on to the next paper.
I think we should record our appreciation of that effort. Both we'll hold back on the accounts once they're signed off. That's the time to look off the banks on that front.
Sorry, Chair, I want to leave comment, is that okay?
That's fine, sorry, I missed you.
No, that's fine. As somebody that attended the F&P committee meeting, we actually made a very same comment to you in the event in terms of the great performance at the end, both in terms of revenue and capital. We did ask Chris what went on with the 12.7% for capital subject in jest, because I think it's phenomenally good performance, and we recorded that to be in the committee meeting first.
Yes.
With revenue as well.
And that has been looked at before we kept that with the team.
Thank you.
So that was not a typo, it was 12.17. Thank you for that.
An improvement from a delivery of just under 14 pounds last year.
Oh, that was my comment actually. I was going to ask you what happened with what got in seriousness when you look at the capital programme last year, what the changes that had to occur in the the management of that capital expenditure limit is phenomenal. With all that complexity of last year's plan.
We've got papers after to that to the details.
So just for the record from the board, I wanted to say thank you to you, Chris, for your management of the capital programme in particular. Obviously, we'll come back to the accounts, which I'm sure will go through smoothly, but also based on your budget holders. So, well done for managing the finances. I think particularly you, with the huge operations director coming in and understand just doing the budget. I think that needs to be recognised.
Market involved in that.
I don't think that it's fantastically well managed.
Chair, finally, what's going to happen why that table is red when there's an underspend? I know it's a variance.
Finance directors are never happy.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
But when we get onto the next paper, we will see that we are starting to look at some of that.
So as you got DMOB happy on the last one, I've seen that. Let's move on to the to month one.
That's okay, Chair. Thank you. So yeah, moving on to the second paper I thought, which is to say we'll get stock visits, so that's great. And we still will bring the accounts through for approval, but we are into the new financial year, and so what we've got in front of you is also the paper that provides the first month's performance. It is 1 month, and I will sort of caveat it in that way clearly, and I know that would be in the system long enough that we never need to do a month one. First reporting would be month 2, middle of June, before you know what's happening from a financial perspective. Now that's long gone, but it is still the first month, and does allow you to make sure that the budgets are set in a way that you want it to be, and the translation of the financial plan with the IFTP as well. Through in the way we expect to do the ledgers and some technical stuff like that. Finance Performance Committee received a presentation of this, not this paper, just so the board members are clear on that, because of timing. The committee meeting was only the day after, the day after we had to submit this into the Welsh Government. So it hasn't received the government's presentation of this. It's pleasing to see that we've continued. I was a bit concerned about this, if I'm honest. I will say I was concerned now, given the financial challenges we've got in this year, what month started to tell us and show us. So I was pleased. I was pleased that we continued. It's important that we do as much as we can for as long as we can, deliver that continuing run rate of balance position. So I was pleased to see that, and we actually had to do that without some of what may have needed to have been done around some of the perhaps potentially slightly higher risk assumptions we might have had to make in terms of funding to support some of this, the things which are still ongoing and still negotiated and still settling down for this year. So I was pleased with that, and after this thing set. So I am pleased to see that. It is based on, however, a suite of funding assumptions consistent with the IATP in particular. Predominantly within them is, as was advised by government as we concluded the financial plan for this year and the IFTP process, that we will be able to assume funding coverage depending on what you described as these exceptional cost pressures that we're all facing across everybody, but certainly across NHS roles this year. And that does include the increase in costs for 1.2% increase for employers on the national insurance increase, and energy. In particular gas, electricity prices, and now increase as well, obviously fuel. and some aspects of cost and continuing that we put in for advancements that were part of the response to the pandemic, in particular PPE and some of the cleaning standards we put in. So there is an assumption, and the paper just described, the current estimated annual value for us of that, which is in the region of about 7 million. So that's quite a volatile forecast for that for 1 month, particularly. NIH effects, we think we know what we do know what we're probably going to say in terms of PPE and some COVID cleaning standards, but obviously there's still quite a lot of volatility about what's going to happen with energy prices, particularly on whilst the NHS does forward purchase as much as it can. It hasn't done as much of that in the recent past, for obvious reasons, because consequences of some value that we don't want to fix at current payments. So there is still a lot of work ongoing across the finance community and NHS for us to settle this down and to finalise the processes and the mechanics by which we will be covering these costs. But it's important to note that current balance position continues on that funding basis. The directorate variances, as you can see, knowing that Paul was going to ask that, we've started to enhance some of the lag rating on it. So if a variance is a variance, it's not just rate. There is an enhancement to coding to try and sort of present something a little bit more meaningful in that context. And you're welcome. And the paper will, as we go into the year now, this is the first month, but once we get to month 3 and quarter 1, we will be introducing the much more sort of detailed focus on some of the savings plans we had a few years ago. Before the pandemic, we had quite a detailed suite of sort of high-level reports for the main savings delivery requirements. So we only give the increasing focus on the savings this year. We will be bringing that back through and we're introducing that. In terms of the variances themselves at the directorate level, there's only sort of 2 I wanted to pull out. Which are offsetting just from all the 3 in terms of how the reporting is accounted for this at the minute. All members will recall that one of the income assumptions that we have in our budgets for this year is the continuing funding for the backfill costs for the enhancements we put into the critical support desk, the increase in commissions. That hasn't been confirmed through to us. We're still in the funding. It was supported in that context and we assumed in that way in the financial plan in the AMTP, but we haven't got a full balance of the recovery of that yet. So we're not assuming the income recovery of it. And as we know, we're offsetting the impact of that currently, as we spoke earlier, in terms of some of the vacancies we're holding in PCS services and the CH2 process in particular. So you see the offsetting adjustment there on income. And within the operations director. What is really pleasing, as again we mentioned earlier, is within that operations director there is a direct offset of that, which basically means the net service as balanced at the very least balance in month. So you haven't seen that offset by open spending in there, which again I thought might happen. But some of the measures that we put in place again, it's 1 month data, but it's pleasing to see. The only final thing I was going to notice is the risks then. So what we've described, we have to, returns into Welsh Government, we have to quantify as best we can, and some of those values are easy to quantify, certainly at this early financial year, any of the risks we want to flag, and we also have to put a rating on those risks. Now, we haven't necessarily described or suggested at the minute that we've got any high financial risks individually being reported into government. But we have got a number of risks, a reasonable number, and quite a, if you added that is quite a significant value of risks. Now, a couple of these are technical risks, and we've already had a response from our returns into government that landed last night, literally, but as described, a sheet providing legal some assurance that some of these risks, some of those technical ones about depreciation, impairments, and the permanent income benefit scheme will be funded again every year. But we have to flag it at the start of the year to ensure that is the case, and the government always asking us to remove those risks and report them for next year because we don't need to include the risks. But even if you take them out, there is still, as we know, coming into the year, a higher risk financially. We've increased previously our corporate risk register rating for financial delivery of strategic financial duties on the back of that. And I think it's, that's clear from this. As I say, whilst individually there's not a high risk, and I'm not suggesting that, overall we've got a high risk, we've certainly got a higher risk than we had in the recent past because of that number and value of the holding. But obviously we will continue to monitor that through finance performance committee and the board, and hopefully, you know, the good performance that we've started the year with will continue. You know, there's other things that we will know that pick up later on today, other pressures and other risks that we want to balance against the financial risk at some point going forward. But as it stands, this is the reported position today. So I'm asking the board to particularly note this, as I say, accepting that if we had a presentation of this is the first time everybody can see the paper that this way for the new financial year, and as we have to either direct the board changes with the ask us to make sure that we do the solutions that we put as well. So we will just want to check.
Thank you, Chris. Very helpful. Any comments from colleagues who are left in two? So like a very clear summary to me. Okay, any additional queries or comments? Your sense you've got a handle on what might happen, which is the important thing. So we'd be happy to note and gain assurance around the 1 month position. Also to note the associated monitoring return.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. So we then move on to effectively make sure the outturn position against our TP deliverables for last year. So good to see this report.
Thank you. I'm just starting my video again.
We just need to
Just because I'm already charging, so I need to jump between which ones are charged and which ones are. Okay, thanks very much. Chair, as you say, this is an outturn position in terms of our IMTP for last year. And this went to the F&B committee, so we did briefly note and discuss it at that point as well. We've had various reports through the year, so I don't think any of this would be a particular surprise in terms of the achievements that we've made. And I think part of this links back to the conversation we had earlier, which is around, you know, there's a lot of very good stuff going on in the organisation, you know, where the lens you put on it, you see a lot of actions and things being delivered, which is really, really positive, being in such a high pressure and difficult environment we're working in. So I just, you know, just to note really on page 2, you've got the 2 kind of dials there, which just show in terms of split by almost those are the ambitions of the things we say about the service that we want to do, particularly in service and enablers of things like, you know, workforce enablers, ICT enablers, etc. But you can see there that a large number of those things we set ourselves as targets for last year are green, which are on track, or blue, which is complete. Through the year, we did note to the board and to committees that they were things which would pause, because the kind of extreme pressures. So there are a number of areas that we paused there, a small number that were closed completely in terms of actually decided that wasn't the thing that we were going to be pursuing. And then a very small number of amber and red. And I mean, in terms of the red, which are things that we didn't deliver really at all within the timescales that we originally set ourselves at the beginning of the year. They're just set out on page 3 for you to see. And again, I don't think any of those will be a surprise to you in terms of things that we've talked about during the year. So perhaps, you know, we talked certainly about the salary system a lot. I think we discussed Becca earlier in your update request some limited progress in terms of some of the policy strategy stuff because of additional resources that we didn't have in terms of supporting that charity we talked about before. We've not had the resources to fully fund that. I will just look at the contact first because that's kind of an interesting one. I think we haven't touched on particularly. So, you know, the 111 service itself is now live across the whole of Wales. You remember the contact first or think 111 first pathway was really about encouraging people who thought they might need to attend DD to ring 111 first, and we would then direct them or undertake a clinical assessment and then direct them potentially to a secondary clinical assessment within health boards in a flow centre or a clinical hub. with the idea that they would prevent these meetings going to potentially finding alternatives within their patch. And that system, that pathway is actually live in Cardinvale and in Arundel and in Swansea. In Cardinvale in particular, really promoted this before we went live with that, and both of them living in Cardiff will know that they promoted CAB 24/7 extensively. And actually what we're seeing now is that there are large numbers of patients who ring 111 who for the last year or 18 months have been used to ringing before they attend ED. So we're still seeing that flow of patients come through 111 actually, and they're out into their secondary assessment clinical hubs and on to primary care or other alternatives. So we know it works actually quite well, but what we haven't had is any further funding then to really promote this, because obviously if you promote it as a pathway, you need to have more call handlers and more clinicians from our perspective to deal with that first contact. And the health boards have to set up a flow centre or a clinical hub to take the calls, as an alternative to an ED. And no further funding has been made available from Welsh Government this year to expand that service. They put their money into the same day urgent care centres and urgent primary care centres. But, I have a suspicion that over time we'll move towards this again, because it's certainly in the 6 goals. It's in the 6 goals framework that that's what they want to see. But it's a shame. We spent a lot of time, didn't we? We're working very, very hard on that, so we can see the real benefits that's got for patients. But at the moment, it's in those 3 areas, and we'll continue in those 3 areas, and hopefully, in due course, we'll see that roll out. So again, that wasn't really our funding, it was the system that kind of slowed that down, opposed to us not going and delivering as fast as we wanted. So I just thought if we hadn't touched on that for a while, we should sort of understand what to do that service.
Just make a quick comment on that as well. With the Cardiff and Balfour on board, what we've done is we've sort of a tipping point where our call handlers now remember to do it much more, which is now having a positive effect on both the AD and Swansea Case numbers as well. So in some respect, it's disappointing that with the funding being pulled at a time where actually critically we've got that stopping point, our call handlers are getting onto it, our clinicians are getting onto it, and we've almost now delivered more of it because of the that's it's disappointing, I think, from all of us.
The teams worked really, really hard on that all last year. So that's that. So my overall conclusion, I think, is that we managed our MTP pretty well last year. We delivered a lot. We were sensitive to pressures, and we understood when to pause things when that was necessary. Some of the things we didn't manage to achieve are things that are not really slightly out with our control anyway. And let's say it mirrors the comments earlier on board, which say that this is an organisation that really does is kind of action orientated and moving forward, and I think that's really positive to see. So hopefully, as we start seeing the reports from this year's IMTP, we'll see equally good progress as we find the next step for this year. Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel. Jason, you wanted to say anything from your point of view?
I mean, I think the only thing I would say is to add to the points that Rachel made, in fact, just to underline a couple of them. Of course, the delivery with Rachel just taken us through against the IMTP last year, as we all know, was in a second year of significant disruption and change in the year. So to I think delivered as many of the objectives as we set ourselves in the preceding year or last year, in the year of additional pressure, substantial change in the year that wasn't foreseen when we shaped those actions to move us forward. We should just, as a board, I think, recognise and thank the organisation and see within directors about the table specifically for their work in delivering that, because it is a strong, good, I think, record of achievement, despite the disruption around it.
I think that's very fair. What's your comments?
Yeah, absolutely. If you look at the organisation's, if you look at the organisation's achievements, we've already had the financial feedback, we've not got the IMTP feedback. we look at them together, plus all the other, the well-being qualities of the actually the signal of a successful organisation, despite all the challenges we've been facing and the bad press we've got. Actually, when you look at it, there's a lot to achieve. So, yes, great.
I think that's the moment. I mean, there's just one reflection for me for the future, which is where I was at this point, which is about metrics, trajectories on metrics as an accompaniment to the IMTP. Last year was exceptional, of course, as you described. Something to hang on to once. Let's assume we're out of the sticky stuff where we've got more control over our destiny, and seeing metrics that we can influence come through alongside the IMTP becomes more significant, I think.
I mean, the way you're absolutely right, and I think we, as part of that review of metrics, and I was talking about earlier in the MIPR, we want to be able to show how they link in within the IMTP. We've got a sense of, these are the things these are the long-term deliverables, these are the actions, and these are the metrics we think will be influenced by that work. What we don't probably do that way now is then show that in this report or show it to a sufficient amount in some of our programs. So that's to be. So I know in some of our programs, so for example, the Ops transformation, have a benefits scorecard. So every time they have updated, this is the benefits that we're expecting to get from this program. Today, what are we seeing? We're starting to do that in gateway to care, but probably starting to try and make that link a bit more explicit. So I agree that's aiming to make the link more explicit, and hopefully, as you say, especially as English, we might see some improvement in those metrics.
Well, we touched on consultant close, haven't we? I think we should get 15% this year. It would be good to get there and know that if you look at the years as part of it. And then you mentioned sickness as well in that context as well. Of course, we've got an improvement plan there, and we expect to see trajectory that brings that down. Okay, moving to the camp though is as a board, I think very much we want to not only just note this report, but I think express appreciation for the hard work that's gone into delivering on that multiplicity of things. Also, your work, Jason. So we'll make sure that's, if you're happy, that's captured in the minutes. So thank you. Thank you also to you, Rachel, for steering us through this and tracking it. So a lot of work goes into putting this together, such a disparate range of activities. So thanks also to you and your team. So we're happy on that note to move on. Good, okay, positive move, onward and upwards. So another look back. It's this is a big item of the report. So hopefully, Trish, you can steer us through it. Because at face value, it's a half-day conference, isn't it? But so well put together, I'm absolutely confident that we can do this. So I'll pass over to you to introduce. I won't endeavour to try and bring it back.
Thanks, Chair. It is a tone of papers, but understanding that the great majority of them have already been through all of the committees and been approved, so they are here for final approval for the board. So yes, so there is a huge amount of papers. So thank you for your forbearance and reading. So the paper will set out that the board is required to undertake an annual self-assessment on its effectiveness, and what this paper tries to do is bring together those internal and external sources of assurance that support the assessment for 21-22. And the headlines of those really are the two Audit Wales structured assessments that have been done in 2021. They've both been reviewed by the board and the audit committee. Phase 1 structured assessment considering planning arrangements, underpinning the development and delivery of the operational plan for the trust. And phase 2, looking at the corporate governance and financial management arrangements. There's also the joint escalation and intervention arrangements, which saw the trust remain routine arrangements. Externally facilitated board development that took place in September last year, which covered good practice in board governance. We also have in Annex 2 a self-assessment against the 2017 Governance Code, And you'll see that that demonstrates good compliance with the code as well. And it's something that we have to confirm in our annual report. So it's set out there for you how we self-assess that. We've then got the effectiveness reviews of the 7 board committees, which took place in quarters 3 and 4, and reviewed in terms of reference to the committees, the operating arrangements and membership. And board members also reflected on the effectiveness of the board via a survey, and the results of that are at paragraph 12 and reflect a positive view of the effectiveness of the board as well. And also the areas for development and improvement, and they will all go into the corporate governance team's plan for this year, and some of which have already commenced. So the output of the effectiveness reviews of the committees is a set of revised terms of reference for each committee, and you'll see that the proposed amendments have been agreed at each committee. We've got marked up versions of those terms of reference there. You've also got the annual reports for each committee, which set out for the board the committee's view of their effectiveness through the year, and also sets priorities for each committee. And you'll see that I've put them specifically in this SR as well, so you can see them at a glance. And we will be jointly with the chair preparing a report every quarter so that the committee can see progress against those priorities, and we'll spend a bit of time to sort of draw out exactly how we would be showing progress with those, and I'll come through the highlight reports. I think I'll leave it there, Chair, that the annexures in 3 to 9 have the annual reports and the terms of reference. So the terms of reference are for approval, as are the annual reports.
Thank you. A prodigious effort to work through that to bring this together in this slide, which is a great step forward. Comments or questions? I have one. Pause. Paul.
Just a comment in that the People and Culture Committee annual report, it says we will establish our priorities to put that in the details so that we report to the board for the next meeting.
Yes, it's in the S bar, I've included that now. Also, it's on page 7. So the 3 priorities that we agreed are set out there now on page 7 of the S bar. Is it page 7? It's page 7 or 9. Paragraph.
Yes, it is. Page 6 and 7. Yeah. Trish?
My question, Trish, was about audit committee. Martin's obviously not here, but obviously the audit committee reviews itself. It's around that, the external sources of assurance, the board's effectiveness, whether the audit committee plays a part in that exercise. Is that how you see the process?
Yes, so the timetable for next year will be such that this will go through the audit committee, and the audit committee will report to the board, because that's the appropriate way of governance. The way it fell this year, it just didn't fall appropriately. So Chair's working group looked at a timetable for the commencement of next year's effectiveness review, which I'm sure will just be around the corner before we know it. And there will be a standalone audit committee to look at this, and Martin's is comfortable with that.
That's great. I mean, the other thing to say is that the board is multiple triangulation of effectiveness with external agencies using an internal assessment as board secretary. There's current feedback from board members and committee members and their own board development events. So I think we've got a wealth of evidence. And I was struck by the fact that even though we have a limited response to the board questionnaire, there's some really rich material in there, which I think is relevant to our board development discussions tomorrow. It's a very helpful suggestion around areas for improvement and board training as well. So I think that's the stages things to carry over because we don't want to lose sight of those. It's a really good piece of work. So on that note, are we happy first of all to acknowledge we've reviewed the external and internal source of assurance? Done that? We're happy?
Yes.
Okay. And here we do approve something. We've reviewed the committee annual reports and terms of reference, duly amended. Are we happy to sign those off?
Yes.
Brilliant. amazing amount of business brought together in succinct fashion. So thank you, Trish. Look forward to that developing further. That's the work. I think you're still on your feet, actually, for the next item, which I very skillfully managed to pass to you as a routine item, which you do far better than me, which is the government's report.
Happy to have them, thank you, Chair. So this just sets out the Chair's actions since the last meeting and use of the trust seal. So Chair's action since the last meeting, we had one Chair's action on the 29th of March, which was to approve the 22-23 initial budget, initial revenue budget. You also see that that was not a Chair's action by way of email. We actually had a Teams meeting for that. And you'll see the full paper is at Annex 1 and full note of that as well. We then had another Chair's action on the 27th of April with respect to the negotiation of the settlements of the claimant's legal claim. And then the 9th of May to extend co-reporting at the Grange and Marsden Hospital. So seeking the board's ratification of those Chair's actions. And then at paragraph 2, there was just the use of the trust seal on 2 occasions on 2 leases.
Okay, so that's pretty clear. So the only one I want to make sure we get right is the Chair's action around the initial budget 22-3, which is a big thing for the board to sign off. So will the minutes for today contain the fact that we've effectively, by doing that Chair's action, signed that budget off?
We'll ensure that there's a
Just make sure we're.
I think, yeah, absolutely, make sure of that. I think the important thing is, if we look at the important thing, that they've demonstrated the board approved the budget before we begin the vote, which is just but the note today can be good.
That's a very important document, which at the moment is appendix. That's the point. Okay, you happy to do that?
transparency.
So happy with that first Chair's action. Second one is more specific around the 27th of April, the claimants and legal costs. Happy with that one. Finally, the extension of co-reporting Grange and Marsden. Again, I think they turn back. Okay. And don't use of the trust seal. No jokes, please. Okay. Actually, that's good.
We thought about this.
Have we missed anything there, Trish? I don't for the government report, so thank you. The only thing we need to, and this is an aside, is given the history of the Chair's actions, where at one time some orders were saying they were regarded as last resort, didn't want to see too many. And we did actually correspond and reduce them. We came back to them as a very useful decisions during the pandemic, just to need to keep the dialogue going with auditors as to their view on the use of it. I think it's perfectly legit and better use of their time, provided we're very explicit, which we are.
I agree. I think that the standing orders absolutely allow us to do this in circumstances of urgency. Plus, we recently developed a governance practice note that went through audit committee of the auditors there on the use of Chair's action in this way. So I'm very comfortable.
Yeah, good. Okay. So that brings us to the end of active business. We've lastly got consent items. Fairly straightforward, I hope. First of all, so this is for information only. So you have our committee minutes. 5 committees listed there. We're simply asked to, they've already been approved by those committees, so we're simply asked to receive and adopt them. Are you happy with that?
Yeah.
Okay. Then below that, collection of papers from East, West and shared services, which I guess are for information. We're happy to make sure. Sorry, yeah.
No, I just thought it was useful to keep at least for information, but the East papers in particular, I think it's worth pointing out that there are significant pages of notes relating to the discussions, particularly around
Which will be relevant to our discussion later on. Yeah.
This last week's now meeting report is pages and pages and members can see the discussion.
Yeah. Well, that's helpful. I think the list is a public record. Yes. So that's what we're going to do. I think I'd encourage you always to look at the use of paper each time. Okay, so we're just there for information. So we're now at any other business. Probably left 5 minutes for this. No other business? I'll whisk round. Okay, this side. Okay. Good, that was quick. Date and time of next meeting. This is the big occasion, the accounts, plus 13th of June, 9:30 annual accounts. Venue. Teams. Okay, so that's the first just one item. Okay, we're happy with that. Good. The last thing to do, I think, is as we have to have permission to meet with private this afternoon. So can we now resolve to do so with the business that you've seen? It's been the agenda. We resolve. Okay, thank you. Lastly, good step forward at the end there for information acronyms. Perhaps a reminder to ourselves, we use phrases in our meetings which will be different to people watching in. So here and there, when you introduce a new acronym, probably go on picking it for people, even though there's a schedule at the back. But I think that's a good step forward. So that brings us to the end of business ahead of time. Now, we did say, time permitting, we would consider back to that staff video, but I'm told the technology is not going to work for us. Is that right? Sadly, which I won't dwell on. We'll have the inquest afterwards, but not feasible.
My proposal, Chairman, would be that we as a board see it tomorrow in the development day we have, and then we bring it back, given it's a video, we bring it back to air publicly at our next board meeting, in addition to the patient staff story, which we take on that page.
I think it's a really good idea. Are we happy with that?
Yeah.
Okay. So we now draw this meeting to a close. There's just a couple of things to cover outside the meeting before everybody runs for a break. Just want to check the recording now goes off. I draw things to